it's Mo. It is November 29th, and this is a video that I do every year where I talk about all the books that I've read so far in the year that have made me cry. This is a big year. I cry a lot at books. I cry a lot at everything. I actually find it very difficult to listen to music, especially if I listen to music like in my headphones without having like a sobbing jag at some point. I find it difficult to watch movies that are sentimental. I really don't like the feeling of being forced into an emotion. That's why I don't like musicals. I really don't like when the music swells. I don't like children's movies for that a lot of times. I don't like musical movies. I don't like musicals. I don't like when the music, the plot dictate where you're supposed to feel emotion. I don't like it really with horror movies either, but I find it more nefarious and more unsettling when it's something that makes you cry. But that being said, I cry at a lot of things now. I never used to. I always cried at some things, but now I cry a lot. So a lot of books make me tear up and a lot of books make me cry. But what I like about crying at books is that it's not forced. Like, it could be an emotional part of the book, but whether you cry doesn't determine solely on what you're reading. It also means that you're connected to the characters. It also means that you're connected to the story. It also means that you are seeing yourself in something that's going on, seeing a circumstance that you're used to or that you went through, feeling something that is within you as well as within the books. It doesn't have to do with like music and tone and color and forced emotion, which I, again, don't like, but I do like to cry at books. And so here are all the books that I've teared up at or I've cried. Now, my qualifications for tearing up are that I like well up with tears and I could cry, because there are times when I get like a little misty-eyed and I don't always put that into the teared up section. Teared up is like when I could cry at a book, but I don't actually cry. And then cried is when I like cry at a book and I'm crying and it's sad. Let's talk about teared up first. There are more of those. According to Storygraph, I've teared up at 26 books so far in 2025. Now, I will probably read more books that I will cry and tear up at in the last month of the year. It's kind of good, and maybe I should remember this for next year, to do this video before December, and then that way I can go back and look at last December. So in 2026, I can start in December of 2025, look at all the books that made me tear up that month, and then move on to 2026. I did not do that this year. So I don't know where the line is of what I've already told you in the past video. I'm obviously not going to look it up. I'm already filming. We'll just do the calendar year so far of 2025, but next year we'll remember and we'll do December as well. These are in no particular order. I don't know why Storygraph does not organize the books that you read for the tags that you make from when you've read them. And there's no way to filter it so that you can read it that way. For instance, the first 2 books are from May, then there's a book from August, and then it goes back to January. Like, I don't know. Why does it do that? I have no idea. It doesn't matter. These are in no particular order. 1, Every Heart a Doorway. I cried, I think, at Every Heart a Doorway the first time that I read it. This is by Shauna McGuire. This is part of the Wayward Children series. It's the first in the series, and there's a very particular part at the end of the book that makes me cry or, I guess, tear up. Now, upon reread, maybe I also think I read this like on the plane or something. So like maybe I just wasn't in the right place to cry. I think that that part could make me cry in the future, but it just made me tear up this time. Every Heart a Doorway is by Shauna McGuire, and it's the first in the Wayward Children series. Next, I teared up at When We Were Birds by Ayanna Lloyd Bonwo. This is a Caribbean story, and it has a lot to do with parental-child relationships. It's about a young man and his relationship to his absent father, and it's about a young woman and her relationship to her mother who passes away, and then their relationship as people. I do not remember why I teared up at this, but I really enjoyed this book, so I could see myself tearing up. House of Blues by Julie Smith is the 5th in the Skip Langdon series, and I can't imagine why I teared up at this either. Skip Langdon is a series that I really enjoy, and it follows Skip Langdon, who is part of the New Orleans police force. This story is about a family who is is having dinner. The mother leaves to get something, and when she comes back, the father is shot and dead in their dining room. The whole rest of the family is gone. So it's Skip trying to figure out what happened during this shooting, where everyone else is, looking for this baby grandchild. I don't know what made me tear up on this. It could be familiar relationships that often makes me tear up. It could be acceptance, because Skip is not really accepted by her family, and so she kind of gathers people around her who are not really accepted by other people. Her best friend is queer, and he's taking care of his deceased sister's children, so it could have something to do with that, but I cannot remember off the top of my head. The Unexpected Mrs. Pollifax is #1 in the Mrs. Pollifax series by Dorothy Gilman. I would assume that I teared up in this for that finding yourself, that idea of acceptance and love and like becoming who you really are. That often makes me tear up. Mrs. Pollifax is in her 60s or 70s, but she is just really finding herself, and she decides that what she really needs to do is become a spy for the CIA, and that really changes her life and it makes her life for the better. And she's a wonderful character because she sees a lot of good in people, but she is not like taken in easily, which I like. The Fall Risk is a short story by Abby Jimenez. It's about two people who get stuck in the second floor of an apartment building. So their apartments like face each other, but someone takes away the stairs and they get stuck there. And one of the subplots of this is our heroine is being stalked by her ex. So I think probably the reason that I teared up at this was like the love of the hero for the heroine and the idea that she felt protected and taken care of. Mother Country is another short story. It's by Etaf Rum, and this short story is about a young woman who is estranged from her mother, and then I'm sure it's that mother-daughter relationship in this that made me tear up. That doesn't always make me tear up on its own, but because of the events of this short story, I could see why I would tear up. Last Seen Alive by Dorothy Simpson is the 5th in the Inspector Thanet story. I just read that this month in November, and I don't remember tearing up at it. Maybe I teared up because part of every subplot of the Inspector Thanet, who is a police detective in a small town in England, is dealing with his family. The particular subplot dealing with his family in this book is about young people dying by sniffing glue, which tells you kind of the age of this. So he has this very poignant conversation with his son about glue sniffing and about how parents are not always smart enough to warn their children of things, and that probably is what made me tear up. Everyone on This Train is a Suspect is the second in the Ernest Cunningham series by Benjamin Stevenson. This is an Australian author, an Australian series about Ernest Cunningham, who is a very small technical author who writes books about mystery writers, and they're like informative books. Like if you want to write a mystery, he tells you all about like how mystery writers do it, and he sells it on the internet, and he's not considered like a real author. But because of the events of the first book, he ends up writing a nonfiction book about his experiences, and then this book is about him going on the book tour for that book. I don't know why I would have teared up at this one. Maybe Ernest's relationship with his love interest, but I'm not sure. I don't remember. The Fire Next Time, I also read in November. I reread. This is by James Baldwin, and it is a nonfiction essay about James Baldwin's feelings in the 60s about life and the Black experience. And the first time that I read this, I cried. I've read it 3 times now. I read it at least once a year. It's one of my all-time favorite books already, and every time I read it, I get something new out of it. And usually when I cry for the world. I cry for James Baldwin, who had so much hope and so much love and so much respect for people, and I'm often crying for our situation. And I think the first time that I read this it must have been 2022, I was crying for us. You know, I was crying for where we are, and I'm sure that I teared up now because of where we are. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This is the second Louise Erdrich that I've read, and this follows Tukey, who went went to jail and has now got out, and she works at a local bookstore. And this is a pandemic book, so it takes place during the COVID pandemic, and it talks about George Floyd. And I probably teared up several times in this. I probably teared up while they were talking about George Floyd and while they were talking about how the different characters in this book were reacting to George Floyd. But I think I also teared up for Tukey because, again, Tukey is finding safety, finding love, finding a safe space, and that will often make me tear up or cry. Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness is another book that I read really recently. I think I read that last month. This is a nonfiction by Susanna Cahalan, and it's about her experience with a mental sickness. It's not really mental illness, but she was ill in her brain. I don't know why I teared up for this. Maybe because of her helplessness, and again, like being able to be helpless and rely on people, which is, you know, a feeling that not all of us get to have all the time, and a lot of times that'll make me cry. The Cat, the Quilt, and the Corpse is a Cats in Trouble mystery. Number 1. It is by Leanne Sweeney. It is a very silly cat cozy mystery, but there's this whole part in the beginning of the book where she might have lost one of her cats. Like, there's a break-in her house. This is in the very beginning, so it's not a spoiler, and one of her cats is missing. And the whole idea of her cat being lost is so horrible. And there's cat death in this. It's not super graphic, but just anything to do with a lost pet, any idea of that, I could see how that would make me tear up. I'm a little bit surprised it didn't actually make me cry. Claire DeWitt and the Bohemian Highway is the second in the Claire DeWitt series. This was a reread for me this year. I think I probably teared up at this one because of Claire's situation and because of the losses that Claire has had and the relationships that she mourns in the book. I would guess that's what it is. What Feasts at Night, Sworn Soldier number 2. Gosh, I really don't remember a lot of these tearing up at. I'm not sure what in this T. Kingfisher short story retelling made me tear up. Maybe something to do with Hobbs, the horse. Maybe something to do with Alex and the relationship that Alex has with their friends and family. Shore of You, Tales of the City number 6. There's so many series on here. I've read a lot of series this year. That's a video that'll probably come in January. I usually do that early in the year. Last year I think I filmed it in January, but it came out in February. I'm hoping to film it a little bit earlier and just talk about the series that I'm currently in the middle of. Shore of You is the 6th in the Tales of the City series by Amistad Maupin. I love this series. I'm sure this either had to do with the injustices that queer folk face. I'm sure this had to do with the AIDS epidemic because AIDS is a very prominent storyline during this time of the book, which these books start like in the 70s and then go all the way to current day, and you follow along with these characters. But actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think there's a very specific death that happens in the previous book that gets brought up again in this book. One of the characters who you come to really like and admire passes away from AIDS, so I think that when this is talked about in the book, it probably made me tear up. Junji Ito's Cat Diary, Yawn and Moo by Junji Ito is a graphic novel about Junji Ito's cats. Junji Ito is a horror manga creator, and this is done in a very silly, tongue-in-cheek, almost horror way about how he moved in with his wife and how he met his cats and how he got his cats. But very, very, very sadly, at the end, there's a little extra comic that talks about his grief after one of his cats passes away, and of course, that made me tear up. Taproot by Kizzy Young was a book that I read way at the beginning of the year. I don't even know where that book is. I really liked that. It was another graphic novel. It's funny that they put the two graphic novels together, and this is about a boy who's feeling lonely and has a hard time connecting with people, and about a ghost that he falls in love with. So, of course, queer joy is going to make me tear up. Most of these books are going to make me cry in a sad way, but some of them are going to make me cry out of joy and love for especially queer characters. Death of an Ex by Delia Pitts is number 2 in the Vandy Myrick Mysteries series. This is one of my favorite New Jersey authors, along with Dorothy Gilman. Both those series have connection to New Jersey. The Vandy Myrick series takes place in New Jersey, and Vandy Myrick is a detective, a private eye, cry. And I think probably I cried because a prominent feature of these stories are Vandy's daughter having passed away. And so often very emotional things are brought up with Vandy, so I'm sure that I teared up maybe when she was talking about her daughter. I distinctly remember what I teared up about in The Foxwife by Yang-C Chu. Yang-C Chu is one of my all-time favorite authors. I've read all 3 of her books that have been published in English. This particular book is about a fox who can turn into a woman, and she goes on revenge for something that's happened to her family. And that particular very graphic scene of something that happened to her family is very disturbing. And I think I teared up several times when that topic was brought up. Very highly recommend, but this is probably the saddest of the books that I've read by her. Ooh, We Took to the Woods by Louise Dickinson Rich. Now, this is the very first book that I read this year, and I don't exactly remember why I teared up. This is a nonfiction book, true account of Louise Dickinson Rich meeting her husband in the Adirondack Mountains when she was like on a trip there and deciding to move in, and they live off-grid in a very rural area. They have to do everything for themselves. They have to be self-sustainable. They have to have a lot of hardships. I know there's dogs in this that they had, and I know that not all of the dogs always live in stories like this, so maybe it was the dog part. I'm not sure. Olga Dies Dreaming. You know what? This is terrible. I never know how to pronounce this name. Let me check.
Xochitl Gonzalez.
Xochitl Gonzalez.
Xochitl Gonzalez.
Okay, so it seems like the consensus of how to pronounce this author is Xochitl. Xochitl Gonzalez wrote Olga Dies Dreaming. This is the debut of this author. I enjoyed it. It is mostly about Brooklyn. I did not think it was like the greatest book ever, but there is familial relationship. There is a character that makes our main character feel safe. So those are all things that could have made me tear up. Middle Game by Shauna McGuire, which is the first in the Alchemical Journeys series, is about a brother and sister who are estranged. They're not estranged. They're separated for long periods of time. And when they come together and when they get into peril, I'm sure I teared up at that part. Hot for Slayer by Ali Hazelwood. I just read this recently too. I don't remember why I teared up at this. Why would I tear up at this? It's like kind of a steamy short story. Probably safety, probably feeling safe. You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian, which is the second in the mid-century NYC series. I haven't read the first one. I love this book. I think I teared up from queer joy at this one. This is about a reporter who is out as much as he can be in the 50s in New York, and a baseball player who he meets who is not out. And both of them, for various reasons, don't think that this relationship is going to work, but both of them, for various reasons and because they're in love, pursue the relationship. And there is a lot of queer joy in this book, so I think that was what it was. Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. This is the third Toni Morrison that I read and the third in publication order. I think the part that I teared up in this is a mother-daughter relationship, which is a side plot. This mostly follows a young man who grows up kind of being at first unsure of himself, and then like a turn is taken and he becomes very sure of himself, and in that sometimes he leaves people that he loves behind. And then the subplot of someone that he left behind is a mother-daughter relationship, and I think that's what made me tear up. Swimming Lessons by Claire Fuller is about a mom who disappears from her family's life and leaves letters to the family, and specifically to her husband, in various books around their house. So right up my alley. I did enjoy this novel a lot. It wasn't exactly interesting, weird, or impactful as I thought it was going to be, but that being said, I did really enjoy it. And I think the reason that I teared up was the father kind of getting older and falling into illness and becoming obsessed with finding these letters that his wife left him. Whew, okay, that was a lot of books. Those were only the books that made me tear up. There are less books that made me actually cry. Well, in interesting. Every Heart a Doorway is on there. So I guess I did cry in that. So maybe I should take Teared Up off of that. Wait, maybe I teared up the first time and I cried the second time that I read it. Well, I can't remember. From Here to the Great Unknown is a nonfiction by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Coe. And this is Lisa Marie Presley's memoir, specifically like about her life with her father, Elvis. And it was started right before she passed away and then posthumously finished by her daughter, Riley Coe. And I did not think this was a great memoir. I thought it was a very obviously skewed and inaccurate memoir on both sides, both Lisa Marie and her daughter. I believe the part that I cried at was at Lisa Marie losing her son, which was obviously very devastating for her and her family. Stay True by Hua Su is a memoir about Hua Su losing one of his best friends, and I cried a lot during this book, and just about loss and grief and the 90s, and specifically about loss of identity, because Hua Su really thinks he knows who he is when he meets his best friend, and then his life is like irrevocably changed and his perception of himself is changed. But then when he loses his friend, it changes again and he has another kind of crisis of self. So I find that to be very sad as well. Network Effect, The Murderbot Diaries #5 by Martha Wells. I cry a lot in these. Network Effect is the only one of the series that I read this year, and I think relationship between Murderbot, our main character, who is a security unit who has hacked his own chip and now is a autonomous entity, an autonomous mechanical person, sentient being, has a little bit of a love-hate relationship with someone in this, and I think that this relationship is threatened, and that probably made me cry. But I think probably also the relationship kind of coming back together made me cry as well. Black and Buddhism, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom. I don't remember crying at this, but I would imagine that I cried for the world during this. Black and Buddhist is just what it says on the tin, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom. It's a collection of essays, and it is nonfiction. Born by Jess Vandermeer is Born #1, another series, and this is about Rachel, who is a scavenger in a post-apocalyptic, destroyed world, and it's about her relationship with another person who she seeks shelter and security with, and what happens to that relationship when she brings home a piece of tech that might also be a sentient being. And I think I cried multiple times in this. I believe I cried with the relationship that Rachel has with her other human companion, and I'm sure I also cried at the tenuous relationship that she has with Bourne, the creature that she discovers as well. Trespasses by Louise Kennedy is a novel about the Troubles set in Northern Ireland, and this is about two different sides of the issue with the Troubles, the Protestant and the Catholic. It's about one person from each side and how they try to live their lives and they fall in love despite all the problems and the chaos with this war that is going on in Northern Ireland. And then there is a very sad part, and that's the part that I cried at. The Knight and the Butcher Bird by Alex E. Harrow is a short story. I love Alex E. Harrow's short story, and this is about like a scribe or scholar in this kind of post-apocalyptic Appalachian area. We've gone back to having like knights and scribes, and there is one person in each village who is supposed to be the teller of history and to record history and to pass history down in an oral nature. And then the knights are people who fight these evil creatures, these monsters, these deformed amalgamations of multiple animals and things. And it's about a relationship between those two people and how a scribe and a knight are kind of fighting on the same side and kind of fighting on a different side. And there's definitely some very sad parts, and there's like multiple sad parts, and I definitely cried. The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics is the Feminine Pursuits #1 by Olivia Waite. This is a queer Regency romance, and I'm sure that I cried at this because of some queer joy and some acceptance and some love. Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, Vera Wong #1 by Jesse Husatanto, was a really fun, cozy mystery set in maybe Chicago's Chinatown, maybe San San Francisco's Chinatown. And it is about Vera Wong, who owns a tea shop. She finds a murdered man there one day, and so she starts to gather suspects of who might have murdered this man, but when she does that, she's also gathering a found family, and I'm pretty sure that I cried from the acceptance and the love and the solace that this found family gets from each other. Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow is another short story, and this is another kind of throwback slash post-apocalyptic future idea of going back to knights and warriors. We meet a young person who is held up and told to not die, to work harder, to be better, and serve the prince of this land. And we see how that ties in with the Six Deaths of the Saint. And there's just a lot of really sad parts in this, and there's a little bit of a love story throughout, and there's a lot of things to cry at. The Color Purple by Alice Walker is amazing and such a great book. I'm so glad that I read it. A very intimidating classic, American classic, Black American classic, modern classic. So I put off reading it for a long time, and it is rough because on the very first page there's like sexual assault of a child, and there's a lot of bad things that happen to our main characters, but there's also a lot of queer joy. So I think I cried at sad moments and horrible moments, but I think I also cried at joyous moments and happy moments. The Impossible Fortune, which is the Thursday Murder Club #5 by Richard Osman, is definitely a filler book for this series. This series follows 4 main characters and then people who they pick up along the way while they solve crimes, while they right wrongs, while they form connections. In book 4, it's so sad. Book 4, I just sobbed the whole time. I read that last year. In The Impossible Fortune, book 5, the part that made me cry was kind of reminiscing and thinking back to book 4 and the aftermath of the loss and sadness that has occurred in book 4. So definitely made me cry. The Elusive Mrs. Polifex, Mrs. Polifex #3 by Dorothy Gilman. I don't know what made me cry in this one. This book sees Mrs. Polifex go on what should be a fairly easy mission. She's really just supposed to give passports to a group of freedom fighters who are doing good work in the country. I can't remember where they went now. Budapest, maybe? And the US has decided that they're going to give them passports to get out so that they are not harmed. And I think the part that probably made me cry is the relationship of those freedom fighters and the people who end up helping Mrs. Polifex through the various things, because Mrs. Polifex will do your spy stuff, but she'll always have like a little extra mission that she goes on the side of her own making. So she, in this book, she finds some American children, some young Americans who are backpacking throughout Europe who need her help, and she ends up helping them. And the freedom fighters get involved in that as well. And I think there's quite a sad part involved in all those people that I cried at. Lady Rights Are Wrong by Eliza Casey is the second in the Manor Cat mystery series, and this follows our young lady of the manor. I think her name is Lady Cecilia, and she is discovering feminism and the suffrage movement for the first time in this book. I don't know what made me cry about this. There is a mother-daughter side subplot. Obviously there's murder, people die. It might have been that mother-daughter part. It has a cat in it, so there might be cat catastrophe that made me cry as well. Although our main cat character, Jack, does not come to peril in this particular book, as far as I recall. The Only One Left by Riley Sager made me cry. I did not really like this book. It's interesting that we're going to get down, because these are not in order, we're going to get down to books that I'm like, what? I am not sure why I cried in this and what I cried about. This is about a carer who goes to a house, cares for an older woman who no one else can care for. Our main character is kind of at the end of her rope. She's on her last chance at this job, and she has to do anything she can to have a job, to keep a job. She ends up going to care for this notorious Lindsay Borden type character. And I'm not sure what made me cry in this. There is familiar relationship. There is strict family dynamics that could have made me cry. Love Pamela by Pamela Anderson made me cry, which again, I don't really remember. I think this probably also has to do with her mother. This is another nonfiction memoir. I find memoirs to be very, obviously, even if I don't love them, I find them to be very emotional because they are the real emotions by the people. And especially if I read them on audio, which I did read Love, Pamela on audio, and it's read by the author, which it is read by Pamela Anderson. I think probably familiar relationships that she has, and also Pamela Anderson is a very strong, hopeful person. Sometimes that can not work out for the people who are strong and hopeful, so that might have been what made me cry. And then last but not least is The Ballad of Jacquot Delahaye by Bryony Cameron. This is a pirate novel about lesbian pirates. It's about Jacquot Delahaye and how she is underestimated as a shipmaker. She is used by her father. She is used by someone who she thinks is a friend. She has to go on the run. But when she goes on the run, she finds her found family and she finds her great love. And I think probably I cried for this one out of queer joy. So that is a nice way to end this. Those were the 44 books that made me cry or made me tear up so far in 2025. I'm sure there were other ones that like just missed the teared up section, because there are books that make me almost start to tear up that I don't actually tear up. So I'm sure there are even more books than this, and there will be more books, I'm sure, in December, and then we'll see more books next year as well. Let me know one book that you've read this year in 2025 so far that made you tear up or made you cry. Let me know what book made you cry the most that you've ever read. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!